Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday Live. And just in case you weren't aware, this is actually going to be my last one for a little while. I'm about to go overseas for a couple of months. I know, right? We get excited because I haven't been able to travel in 2.5 years. And so, not as any, well, most other people haven't either. So, but um, I'm about to go away. I needed a little bit of a holiday, but also I'm writing a new book. So you may have seen some of this mentioned before, but I'm bringing out a new book early next year called How to Heal a Workplace. Look at tackling trauma, promoting psychological safety, and boosting happiness at work. And one of the things around, why I'm writing the book is because I wanted to have a look at how people talk about their stories of their sort of psychological injuries at work, and then talk to leaders who are trying to do innovative things, or leaders of industries where we know that there's a problem, and see if we can try and sort through a solution to the problem. And it's one of the things that I've talked about a lot, and I've been just trying to put together some stuff to look at getting some grant funding around some technology development. And as a result, I've actually had to go through and unpack the rational, kind of thinking around my head about why it is that I focus on these things. And it's interesting because, I, as a psychologist, treating people, back even in 2017, I realized that we needed to get to a point where we could deliver services online, because it was a natural progression of, what we were seeing with technology development. And so I started working on a program that enabled us to do that and deliver therapy to people remotely, specifically for treating trauma. And it's something that had never been done before. So I did that back in 2017. And, then, but nobody was interested in it. Psychologists and therapists don't like technology. They're a known technophobe group, right? And a big part of it is because it's a human-centered kind of thing that we do. And so, people would say, oh, no, I really like to see my clients face to face. But there's also a level of, I want to say, infantiling people. So, making them feel like children when they've got a problem that, we as a therapist, they come to us to help them resolve the problem. There's often that, and I'm not saying it is a parent child, but it's that pseudo parent sort of child relationship. They're looking for advice and guidance and support and education and a whole range of different things. And as a sector, we've delivered that for so long that it feels uncomfortable for us to allow people to kind of learn how to do some of those things for themselves. And I look at it this way: it's much the same as when, we raise children and we're getting, we're taking them through that adolescent period. We've got to try and encourage them to be self-aware and make, rational decisions based on what we've kind of given them as the underpinnings of, how they should behave in life, their moral compass and all of these other things. But we're just providing them with guidance at that point, right? It's not like a child where we give them strict instructions. And I think this is one of the areas that we've kind of, I always say to parents of teenagers, you've got to give them enough rope that's elastic, right? Not enough to hang themselves, but enough to kind of allow them to explore. And in much the same way, I think as an industry, the mental health profession has kind of, tried to hold on to things much more like we're, parenting a young child. And yet I think we have to get to the point where we can give people information for them to, try things for themselves. And so that's where the technology development really comes into it. But at the same time, we know that what we've got in the community is an absolute, raised level of awareness around the challenges that mental health is presenting to us on a day-to-day basis, because through the pandemic, we started to talk more openly about mental health, both at work, because a lot of us then couldn't work in the same way that we used to. And so then work environments became aware of the fact that they now actually had to understand and deal with some of these challenges because people's mental health was being affected. And I think this is where a big push And even, with the stuff that I'm doing, why do I do these lives with you every week? Because it's about trying to give people some insight about the things that they might be able to do to help change the way that we approach things in the workplace. Because ultimately, when we look at psychosocial risk factors at work, we're talking about usually how people perceive the way they're being treated, and there's been a communication issue that hasn't been well managed. And, at the basis of it, that's really all it's about. Now, but it can be quite complex, right? And so, I had an interesting conversation this week with somebody from a fairly high up organization of, within the emergency services sector, and talking about the challenges when we observe bad behavior at work, when we also recognize that in the past, because we kind of didn't know any better, and especially in, probably male dominated environments, work environments, where we kind of joke and don't really take things too seriously. And it's kind of like, you be silly about things and you don't tend to talk about emotional stuff, that there's an awareness building that that wasn't necessarily the right thing. But it's very difficult for those people then as leaders to feel that they can call out certain things, because they also go, but, I feel a bit like a hypocrite, because how can I call out a behavior when that was something probably 5, 10 years ago, I was doing as well. And that's a real challenge when we start to talk about how we change, cultures in workplaces, because there's often a lot of, oh, well, I used to do that and I'm not proud of it. But how do I turn around and then, pull somebody else up on something that I know is something that, I've made the same mistake in the past? And my comment was, go back to Brene Brown's talk, her TED talk on vulnerability. One of the reasons that that was such a powerful thing was because she was vulnerable, right? So she's standing on stage talking about the challenges that she had herself. And I always say to people, if you show me somebody that you think is inspirational, I will show you somebody who is prepared to talk openly about their difficulties and their story. And that's why they're inspirational, because people, we often have these perceptions that people at, particular levels in our society have managed to get there, and they're almost like this perfection or something, and they don't have the same issues that we have day in, day out. Our interpersonal challenges with our family, our friends, we all have those issues. It doesn't matter what sort of expert you are. We're not immune to the challenges of, interacting with our fellow man, right? And I think this is one of the biggest problems that I see in organizational context, is that there's often this kind of like, oh, well, I'm at the top of the chain and I can't be seen to, be weak, or, not, like, it just seems like if I talk about some of these things and not being right, that I'm actually showing myself to be weak or vulnerable. And yet the most powerful stories actually come from people being prepared to be open about those challenges and sharing how they overcame them. And I think that's one of the biggest things. If I can encourage you to do anything at all, it's turning it around into being, open and empathic about some of the difficulties that we've had. And, I don't mean to genderify things, but it seems that women, and, there's rational reasons why this is the case, women are usually prepared to speak more openly about how they feel about particular situations, whereas men tend to focus more on, facts and figures. And that's just one of those, gender realities of how our brains work, because actually our brains are wired differently. I think it's important when we sort of start to look at that, that we go, how can I sort of eliminate this fear around being vulnerable in front of people that I'm supposed to be leading, and, still kind of maintain their support, and, see you as a strong leader, I suppose. But actually talking about things that have been difficult that you've managed to overcome, or that you've, recognized that you didn't do right and that you've accepted responsibility in and made some change. They're the main reasons that people then are drawn to you as a leader, because, most people talk about the benefits of understanding that somebody else is saying to you, it's okay actually to have difficulties. You're not meant to be a perfect human being, but it's actually in how you deal with those difficulties or look to overcome them, or seek out support in order to move through them, that is the thing that's the most powerful when we're trying to bring people along to understand why we're actually trying to make change. But the biggest problem that we get is that we don't get a sense of reality from a person who's standing there kind of going, oh, yeah, no, I'm right. I don't know why you guys have got a problem, but, it's important that you talk to somebody about your problem, but I never had a problem. You can see that it feels disingenuous. And it's interesting because I was talking to somebody else about, well, why certain leaders within emergency services can be exposed to a whole range of different things and not actually end up with something like PTSD. And yet you get other people that were in the same service that don't seem to have very dissimilar backgrounds, but they do end up with PTSD. And, one of the reasons that that kind of comes up, particularly for that industry, is an awful lot to do with what we understand about how traumatic incidences come about. And that is, when you're exposed to something, do you feel either responsible, or are you trapped in it and it causes you some harm? And primarily, they're the two main things that cause a big issue. So if I can be exposed to, if I was a fire officer, I could be exposed to a whole range of different scenarios and feel that my role and my job ultimately does the best thing for the community, that I'm there to help make sure, we minimize loss of life and property, right? But, there'll be a certain number of circumstances that we can notice that, then it becomes a problem. And that it's normal human things. It's, we there's a child that's involved, because as human beings, we kind of go, you know what? That's just the wrong order of things. A child should never actually, go before an adult. And, it feels wrong somehow to our human existence for that to be the case. So that sort of thing is a red flag, absolutely going to cause some issues. The other one is whether or not we feel any responsibility for what we were supposed to do in the action of it, that we didn't do right, or we feel like we could have done differently that might have made a better outcome. And that's why I sort of talk to people about, a debrief after the scenario should not be about oh, yeah, you stuffed that up and next time just do this. It's actually really checking in about whether or not there's an ongoing feeling of responsibility, because that's the thing that's going to lead to this ongoing sort of traumatic injury. Now, if we take it away from emergency services and put it just back into a normal corporate context, for example, a big part of, where I talk about the development of psychological injuries, usually within the first 3 months of a change, right? Now, whether that's a new person coming into a role, and that new person could come into the job as the subordinate and not have a good relationship with this sort of superior supervisor, or the other way around. You could have a functioning team, you could have a new leader come in. And you often find that there's a problem at that point in time. Now, in the book, I'm actually talking about the fact that we have to go right back to the basics of our onboarding process. But also, when we bring in a new person, how do we support a new person to, engender some leadership within that team environment? And there are a number of ways that we can do it, but we don't actually train our leaders when they get promoted in that space in human resource interaction. And, everybody will ask you when you're going for promotion, oh, well, your team building skills and all of this sort of stuff. And a lot of people can talk about what they might do, but we don't actually check in on how that kind of translates into the actions that they take when they go into a new role. And there are some things that we can do, like routinely. And if we knew that that was going to be something that we needed to keep a check on in the first 3 months of any change in any situation, then I think we would minimize a lot of the misunderstanding and perception issues that often lead to bullying and harassment claims. And then, looking at the escalation pathway of when there is a problem. And a big part of what happens is it's always like, well, this person, that person, and there's this black and white, I'm right, you're wrong, until we kind of come to a definitive answer about who's right. And sometimes it's not as simple as that. Sometimes it's because, there's a perception issue about what this person did or said, and that just has not been well managed or well communicated. And when it comes down to trying to mediate through what the problem is, you get people who'll stonewall and they're not going to budge from their thing until you apologize and you do this sort of stuff. And it's not helpful to try and kind of work a way through, well, where the perception problem developed in the first place, needs to take some responsibility or ownership, and the other person recognizing that maybe they could have done things differently, but well, they reacted to a certain thing, because we're humans, right? And I think it's the biggest issue, that when we get into you know a, a, a tit for tat situation, where it's just kind of like, we do in a workplace constantly go back to, oh, one person has to be right and the other person has to be wrong. And I just think we don't help ourselves by giving a lot of grey area to be able to work through with people about, well, where things could have been done differently, and to get them on a path of being able to move forward together. So I hope that that helped. You get an idea about what I'm going to write about over the next couple of months. So I am having a bit of a holiday. I'm going to the UK. I'm going to a conference in Spain. Then I'm back to the UK to keep writing. And then I'm going to Finland and Estonia and probably Scotland before I come back. So a little bit of, work, a little bit of writing, a little bit of, holiday in there. And I'm hoping that that will bring me back in August, refreshed and kind of like lots of ideas and things to move forward. And so I want to just thank you for being with me on these Wednesdays. You will see a few posts from me live while I'm away, but they won't be, the rigid 12 o'clock on a Wednesday thing going on. But look out for them. And if there's anything in particular, as always, that you want me to have a chat about, just put it in the comments below and I will try and address those along the way. All right. I hope that helps, and I will see you soon.